Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer. Welcome to today's Geek Speak panel. This is our second Geek Speak this year. Our first one focused on working from home and all the challenges that everybody's been facing and kind of how they've adapted over the last year. This one is focused on automation, and I have a really talented team of geeks. I call them geeks, but they're amazing, smart, awesome people. Happy to have them on today. Before I get to everybody's introductions, just a couple of housekeeping details. We are recording the presentation today, so you will receive a link to this tomorrow. It's going to come to you directly from GoToWebinar, so be on the lookout for that. Also, we did get a lot of questions beforehand, so we're going to try to get to as many of those as we can, and I think a lot of them might be like really hefty discussions, but we're going to do our best. But do submit your questions as you have them, or comments, or anything you'd like to throw in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. We only have an hour today, but we're going to try. And finally, at the end, I'll have a short survey for you. It's anonymous and for our use only. All right, so I think most of you probably know these guys. We have Esther, Joe, Patrick, and Ryan. They're all CTPs. Very excited to have them on this panel. Esther has the enviable job of also being a moderator and a panelist, so she gets to keep everybody in line today. So I'm going to hand everything over, and Esther, if you want to go ahead, I can switch to the first slide, or would you guys like to say a little bit more about yourselves first?
Yeah, let's have all of us introduce ourselves real quick, and then I'll signal you to present the first slide.
All right. Well, I'm going to go away for a second, and I'll come back at the end.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. So Ryan, do you want to start?
Yeah, of course. My name is Ryan Ververs-Bijkerk. There's a little small typo in my name on the slide, but it should be an E instead of I, but no problem. I'm working at Rollworks as a technical evangelist, responsible everything they have to do with code, and then we work on a mission to make the Netherlands work smarter and more efficient. So this is what I do, and I'm involved at various customers and focusing mainly also on automation.
Awesome. So Joe, you want to introduce yourself to the public?
Oh, howdy. Well, I am, like you said, my name is Joe. I work with a company called Thin Client Computing with Steve Greenberg, and we pretty much do Citrix consulting for various companies of all sizes. Got into the automation many years ago, about 15, 16 years ago, built my own little framework for automation. We deployed it in lots of different places, so we got a lot of learning experiences over the years of automation. Got away from it for a little while, and now we're starting to see this trend of automation come back, and it's now become a hot topic again. So it's nice to jump back into the pool and swim around a bit.
Awesome. And Patrick, you're up.
Yeah. Yes, I'm Patrick van der Born, senior freelance consultant in the Netherlands, mainly focused on end-user projects with Citrix, and I do a lot with the GPUs, so maybe you also know me from the GPU part. And I'm also an automation geek, focusing many years on image automation. And lately I'm also using a lot of cloud services, so I started to automate things in the cloud and even the Citrix deployments in cloud. For example, the new way via Azure DevOps pipelines, and that's what
Awesome.
I do now. An awesome project. Yeah, and I met you at the project, Esther.
Yes, I know. We have history together.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not gonna elaborate on that anymore. So my name is Esther Barthel. For those of you who do not already know me, I've been active in the community for quite some years now, focusing on automation since 5-6 years. Started to geek out on NetScaler configuration and deployment automation. And like Patrick, I'm also moving to Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions to pick on cloud automation this time. So with that introduction of all four of us and me not trying to be the star of the evening, but to be very moderate with all my comments, Stephanie, I guess we're ready to show the first slide because we've already got some questions to prepare ourselves for this evening. And what we notice is that we're quite some demands or questions in regards to demos and automation examples, and if we were going to show them tonight, like you see with the CI/CD demo that was requested, examples, and even to explain in further detail like evergreen master concepts. Unfortunately, due to the setup of GeekSpeak being a panel discussion, we will not dive into a lot of demos and automations this evening. So please stick with us because it's still going to be fun. And we promise you to make sure that we have some follow-up webinars, some already scheduled, to make sure that we show you all the goodness and all the fun of automation in both on-premises and cloud situations.
Yeah, and especially on the CI/CD demo, I think on the CUGC I've got the session exactly about this topic on the 11th of May. So if not, go to the CUGC website and subscribe for that webinar. And then you will see Azure DevOps pipelines with Terraform for deploying your Citrix Cloud connectors, fast servers within Azure, and the image automation via a pipeline. So very interesting if you want to join me and my partner in crime on the 11th of May.
Awesome. And I think you even have some webinars scheduled, Joe.
Well, we have one coming up. We don't have it actually on the schedule yet, so we're still working out some dates. But it's a follow-up to our April Fool's Day seminar on automation, where we covered the idea of using CI/CD pipelining methodologies for developing an image and deploying that image. And so there was a lot of interest in doing a demo and kind of going through maybe some of the technical aspects of that. So we were looking at late May or early June to do something like that.
Oh, that sounds good. Looking forward to it. So I guess that brings us to making sure that we address some of the other questions that we got as well. So if you can show the next slide, Stephanie, then we're going to kick off with the discussion. Because I figured before we start diving into all the technologies and the different solutions that are available, I guess this is the best question to start, because at least when I started with automation, that definitely was one of my main questions. So how do I pick the right tool for the job? So any advice on that, Ryan?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, as a consultant, still, it all depends. But I think it's really important to keep the bigger picture in mind and make sure that the tools that you select fit your strategy. But I think it's also very important to always be open for new tools and just explore. And by just trying it out in your environment and see if it will benefit your goal, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's really depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that it's also important to set some standards, especially if you are collaborating within a team and you have to make sure that you can all contribute to the project and even extend some of the scripts or some of the solutions that others have developed.
Yeah, you're totally correct. So the way how I mostly approach that is we dedicate like research spikes. So if we define like we want to solve a specific problem. For example, if you think big, we want to deploy infrastructure, and by using code, it's something that's really hot today. So then you're gonna just Google and research for various options, and eventually you will just try some stuff out and see what's working. And especially, or at a certain point, you will decide together with your team on what fits or not. And the way what I really like to make those kinds of decisions is also putting that in code and document the reasoning behind your decision for selecting a tool. Selecting a tool is a sort of commitment, but it shouldn't be a blocker for exploring new stuff. You always need to be open for other solutions.
That makes sense. So how about you, Joe? How did you pick your tooling?
That's a very good question. If I go back to kind of the earlier days, I built a lot of stuff using VB script and the command batch scripts, in Windows.
Maybe we need to explain that to some of the audience, because this is going back to like the Stone Age, Joe.
I know, it's like a VB script is kind of the predecessor to using PowerShell in a sense, but a lot of stuff was great. It was simple, but the issue became you could deploy it at a customer location, but the customer needs to have a good understanding of how some of this stuff works, and if they don't have a very strong scripting background, especially getting into like VB code and even some shell scripting, you have to consider what are the skill sets that are at the customer. And so kind of now when we go into a customer, we kind of try to investigate what kind of tool sets do they already have implemented, which ones are they comfortable with, and then what skill sets do the administrators have, and are they capable of doing some low-level scripting, or do you need some kind of tool that is more of a drag and drop situation, right? I'm still looking for some good drag and drop solutions that help automate certain flows, but you have to consider what when you walk away from that solution that you implemented, can the customer support it, right? Or do you have to come back in 6 months and reverse engineer everything that's happened over the last 6 months and then update their tools again?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess with the current day's tooling, you have enough options, and you have like numerous tools that will give you the same or get you to the same result or end result that you're looking for. So it is becoming easier to pick a tool that people feel most comfortable with.
I know a lot of companies, they've gone down the MDT route because it's a Windows-based deployment tool, right? So they know and understand Windows, so they want to kind of stay and understand in the Windows world. And MDT kind of getting a little aged, for lack of a better way of saying it, when there are newer and better tools out there. And that's one of the things I struggled with, is trying to figure out, hey, do I use Ansible? Do I use Shonk? Do I stick with MDT? And what tools do I go with? I just ended up going with Ansible because it has a rich set of modules for Windows, even though it's kind of a Linux package. You have to kind of get over that Linux hump, but it has a ton of modules and stuff that can be used for Windows. In addition to that, there are hundreds of modules for other things, so the rest of the organization can leverage the same tool sets for the switches, routers, cloud deployments, and any other type of integration. If there's an API, there's probably some kind of module for it.
That makes sense. So how about you, Patrick?
Yeah, a good question, picking the right tool for the job. Yeah, sometimes things are also changing, like the processes we did for years in GUI things. And what I also see lately is that everybody can get everything from the cloud within a second or from his phone. And maybe it's better to look into new tools, which gives you the agility to deploy things and implement things faster. So what I've seen from it's not my traditional automation tools. For example, I am still very fan of event automation, but sometimes it's good to make, for example, golden images. But if you want to fast deploy things, for example, on Azure, maybe you need to dig in other tools like Packer or Terraform or something like that to keep up the pace of all the changes and in your process. So beside, yeah, like Ryan said, you have to see what is your goal. In my project now, we also have a project requirement that we save everything in a repository for auditing, and then you need to select a tool which can handle things in a repository. And for example, SCCM can't that easy. So yeah, it's just looking at what are the needs of my project and what are all the project requirements over there, and the agility you want for the future.
Well, I think that's a really great remark. The agility by selecting tools. If you look, for example, like Terraform, you have the agility to select multiple cloud providers. So you have also a cloud exit strategy because you can even use it on premises. And I think that's really important when you have to hire a goal and then you have to select the tool set based on that. So, for example, also I'm in a similar position as Patrick, also working on a larger project, which is a financial project, high security. So we decided also to go, or at least investigate if Terraform fits our goals, and so far it's working. Kindness, and we're not there yet because it's a full on-premises environment. We're not leveraging the cloud, but we're also investigating Ansible. And using those two tools allows us to have the flexibility to deploy on-premises, in the cloud, Linux, Windows-based, it doesn't even matter. Everything is in code, traceable, and eventually we can reach the goal of automating everything.
Exactly.
It makes a lot of sense. But do you also feel like the current tools that we have available are easy to adapt or to learn, or do you feel like it has a high learning curve for those that are kind of new and still are looking for those first steps in automation?
From my experience, and I know that somebody from my team we're working together with is currently watching. So, but I know that it's the learning curve is quite steep. So you really have to take the time to get familiar with the syntax, trying and create basically a safe environment where you can just basically fail. Because when you fail fast, you will learn faster, and then you will get the hang of it. But I think the best way is, at least if you have some people around you, they can at least give you a little bit of guidance that will help you a lot. And I also still learn every day, and actually working also together with Patrick on a community project, and we learn from each other. So it's always getting new insights and applying new stuff. But you have to start somewhere. It's hard, but you have to really push through and reach out to the community. And I think the community is really willing to help everybody.
Yeah, what I personally like is that you can basically already start using the tools, like deploy or run the pipelines that are developed to get a feel of what DevOps is all about, or automated deployments or configurations are all about, without already understanding the full context of the pipeline itself. And then once you feel more comfortable running those pipelines, there's even more time to dive into understanding the context. So I do feel that even though, as you say, if you want to jump in and get everything or understand everything at the beginning, that's a steep learning curve, but it does allow you to more modular focus on different components. And as you feel more comfortable handling the code and understanding the context of the code, I think it is becoming a natural process to become a DevOps masters.
Exactly, but also I think that the great thing of, if you understand a pipeline, it doesn't matter which solution you're using. If you're using Jenkins, Azure DevOps, whatever, eventually the concepts of a pipeline is in every solution the same. Only the branding, the naming, and the syntax maybe a little bit different, but still it's the same goal you're trying to achieve. Even using MDT, it's basically a pipeline.
Yep.
Makes
You
sense.
found the automation also, just a runbook with steps.
Correct. Well, that's what I try to explain to people as well. The most important thing is understanding or writing down the workflow or the process that you want to automate, and to break it down in steps. And then you can focus on how to automate each and every step.
Yeah.
How does that work for you, Joe? Especially for looking at Ansible, because that's diverse too.
Yeah, so that was quite a learning experience, to be honest. And I want to kind of go back before I get to the Ansible piece to talk about Packer a little bit. And you know, Packer is pretty simple and easy to use, but it's not intuitive. And a lot of these tools and these modules are not intuitive. So you kind of need to look at, you know, use your Google food to try to look this stuff up. One of the benefits we have as kind of a community now, we're well connected, is that we can start, you know, leveraging each person and bouncing questions off of each other. But for the Packer piece, you know, Owen Reynolds did a CUG seminar a while back on Packer, and he posted some code up onto his GitHub, and I basically just took that, got it running. Okay, and so now I got this working, but it doesn't quite do everything I want it to do. Then I decided, okay, well, what do I want it to do? And you can make an entire list, but just you eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? So you don't try to implement all your you know, end-to-end deployment in one shot. You just do a little bit at a time, and then that carries over into, say, like Ansible. It's like, well, how do I use this module? Well, you go to Ansible, you look up the module, you see what all the parameters are, and you just start playing with it in just that context, right? You build a script and the virtual machine, and you just run that one thing against that virtual machine until you got it working, and then you start tweaking some of the parameters, and then you start tweaking it till you get to work where you want. And now you can take that and put that in a playbook, right? And then you work on the next step. Okay, I learned how to copy a file. Well, am I copying it from an SMB share? Am I copying it from the Ansible server? Am I copying it from a GitHub repository? You know, it's not just for copying a file, but you start experimenting and playing with different ways and different options on how to do it. And once you've got that down, then now you got your file copy. What do you want to do with it? You want to run something? Is it an executable? Do you want to modify the file? You know, what is it you're trying to achieve with that? With your playbook, and you break it down into small little manageable chunks. And once you get past some of the, you know, the other challenge was just getting past some of the formatting, right? Because YAML can be very picky at times if you don't have the correct indentations. And it, you know, I used to have a lot more hair. I think some of the came from sports ones, but you know, you pull your hair out trying to figure out why does this not work, and it's just a stupid formatting issue, right? But once you get past some of the hump, and that frustration, it gets a lot easier. And I can say that about Ansible. It was really frustrating the first several times trying to get Ansible to even just work and get it running and integrated. Then it's like, oh, once I got past those hurdles, it became very easy.
Once you execute your first Ansible playbook on a machine, you have like a success moment, popping a champagne, partying. Yes! It's a great feeling.
Hey, I can do WebPing! Yay!
Yeah.
Oh, I just had the hello world text file in my playbook, so.
That's essentially what it's like, isn't it? I mean, it's true as anything, but it's just like the hello world of that module or that feature or that thing you're trying to provision a VM. You know, it's the hello world of provisioning a VM.
Definitely. Yeah, I loved seeing it work. It took me a little while, I have to admit, but yeah, that moment of euphoria, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think if you want to start with this new stuff like Ansible and Terraform, nowadays it's easier to have some lab time, since you just can get some free credits on Azure, and then you can try all this stuff instead of if you don't have time for your employer in a production environment. I can imagine that you not want to test this in a production environment, and just spin up your free credits in Azure or AWS. I think that's also possible, and try to start to deploy your first VM with Terraform and then install it with Ansible. And I also think is that if we're talking about Ansible and Terraform, that's more like a desired state and a declarative approach of configuring things. And what I've seen at some projects I did is that I'm also a Windows guy, so we get used to GUIs and we never touch the PowerShell. And I think there are a lot of sysadmins out there doesn't have that feeling of a developer. If I'm talking about flows and a happy flow, and it's like, hey, what are you talking about?
I still have no idea.
Okay, but if you're not a developer, and I'm also not a developer, I'm just a good scripter, then it can maybe frustrating when you try to start deploying things with PowerShell from the first time and not doing all the error handling correctly. And lately I start with Ansible, and also contacted Joe on the CTP channel. And it's much easier to install, for example, an EXE installation or an MSIX installation with Ansible, because Ansible is doing all the error handling for you. So I think if you're starting with this new thing, it's a good idea to skip the PowerShell error handling yourself part and immediately go to the Ansible thing. I don't know if you guys agree, but I think that's easier to do.
Well, the thing that I really love is that all these tools that we're talking about, whether we're talking about Packer or Terraform or Ansible or any of the other tools, is that they usually just have an executable. So you can even just run it on your local machine just for your basic testing. So you don't need to build an entire infrastructure or burn through your free credits in the cloud before you're even able to get some testing done. So that's one of the things that I love about these tools these days.
But I think also the caveat on that point is that not everything is declared in Ansible. And so sometimes you want to do executor and really specific stuff, for example, for an application, and then there's nothing in there for Ansible. You always have the fallback to just execute a PowerShell script. And then you basically come back to the scripting part that you need to understand the basics of PowerShell in order to achieve the goals you want to have. It's not a single tool that will do everything for you.
That is true.
Totally agree.
So, are we ready to dive into some of the more Citrix focused technology questions that we got in regards to automation?
Actually, I think there's still a question in the Q&A regarding the starting point and also the aspects of code and repositories. Maybe it's also interesting to investigate a little bit of that, or?
Yeah, sure. If you feel comfortable talking or picking or continuing on focusing on the code repository, because I know that that's one of your more favorite topics.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit context. I used to work for a software company, so I have a little bit more of the developer background compared to Patrick, for example.
Or me.
Yeah, so therefore I really understand the developer's approach. But once you get started, I think it's really important to just select a specific goal because the question, I'm not sure everybody can read the question, but it's regarding the beginning in automation in the EUCC space, how to decide which piece to automate, the infrastructure part versus the image management, and what aspects of the automation, like the code repository automation engine, are must-have starting your automation journey. And it depends what the goal is, but you have to start somewhere. Just select if you want to deploy infrastructure. Just go that path, or do you want to have first your image in place? You have to go the image management path. But I think if you look at modern tool set, for example, like an Azure DevOps or any alternatives, it's all about the code. So you really need to understand that the Git approach of making a commit, understand the branching, and applying a strategy on that. I'm not sure how is it for you guys, the Git stuff.
Yeah,
Because
what I
can imagine it's
basically
quite new.
Yeah, what I basically did is that I was just, as I mentioned, a scripter, and I just saved everything on my OneDrive, made a copy of a copy, and this is for customer A, B, Z. And then I start to dig into some sessions about Git, and the first step I did is just enforcing myself, saving my scripts in Git. And I think if you're also doing and saving your scripts, for example, on a UNC file server or your OneDrive, the first step you want to do is to put that in Git, and that will make your life much easier.
Yeah, and it
As
can
I
even be a
and a
private
learning curve.
repository. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it can
exactly.
also be a private repository if you do not feel comfortable or are nervous about sharing any code publicly. So you can keep it all to yourself, but at least it will help you to understand versioning and how versioning tools can definitely help you in faster changing some of your PowerShell scripts or other coding that you have. Because I used to be like Patrick, and I even just had like dates in the names of all the copies that I made just to keep track, because I kept forgetting to put the versioning in the file comments itself. So, and I have to admit, I'm still struggling with because I know if we let if we let Ryan talk even more about branches and pull request and push and all those awesome Git terms, then I'm going to be lost right away, because I'm still struggling to not put everything in the main branch and to make different sections to focus on subsets of features that I want to implement. Or and I guess that's also because I was accustomed to being the only one working with the code. So for me, there wasn't an immediate added value to store it in Git or to even share the code with someone else.
I really know that you have a part that sometimes you make changes and everything breaks, and then you're just hitting the Control Z and reverting all your changes. And this is also something that even though you're working alone on a script, on a project, Git can still help you. So I shared a little, it's a 50-minute video talking about Git, and if you're not familiar with Git, it's a great starting point to get familiar with. Because I think
just like with the
Go ahead,
just
Joe.
like the previous conversation where we had of using tools, it's just start using it, right? You don't have to learn every little feature of it. You can just take one bite at a time. And when you learn how to do that, it's like, oh, okay, now I want to learn how to do versioning. And then you start adding, now I want to open it up so that people can submit tickets, and you can start doing that. I started off just using the Git desktop, right? Just a simple GUI interface that automatically manages that a lot of that stuff for you. Now, once you get used to that, then you can start learning how to use the actual command lines, and because it's basically consolidating and making an easy button for you to do that. But that's a great way to get started with
I really agree. I don't use the command line for Git. I'm using SourceTree because it's one of the great tools that it visually visualize what you're doing. So it's those kinds of tools really help you understand or get a better understanding of Git.
Yeah, and I'm now using SourceTree thanks to Ryan, and it's an awesome tool. Cool.
Awesome. So Ryan, is that all you wanted to share for now?
Oh no, I think we can talk hours about Git and strategies and branching strategy and how you implement it in pipelines. But I know that you have different topics also, so maybe we can continue. Hopefully, we answer a little bit the question, and let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, let's show them the next slide, Stephanie, because they'll love this one.
Yeah. Okay, next slide.
Delete it.
I haven't touched Zen hypervisor since it was called Zen server.
Yeah.
So even before
Maybe it's
then.
Azure.
Yeah, so I have to admit that we're not trying to make fun of the question, because I think the question is a very valid
Exactly.
one. We're just I think in our process of automated deployments and using DevOps, I think we quickly realized that using the template option within any hypervisor is limiting us too much in staying flexible in building golden images or building machine templates. So that's one of the reasons why we might just have a quick laugh in the first response to this question, because I think that and I think that's something that we all talked about already. First, you have to start using the tooling, and then you discover smarter ways of doing things. And in our case, yeah, I would suggest to just find a smarter way of using the virtual machines itself as your golden image, because that allows you, either through snapshotting technologies, to be more flexible, to go back to a previous state, because it's a pain in the ass, to be honest, especially if we're talking about Citrix hypervisor, to turn templates back into VMs or build on top of them. So
Yeah. And I'm doing a lot of Citrix hypervisor with the GPU stuff, and when I'm doing a project of the automation, and that's for Citrix hypervisor, it's just easy to create a VM, install Windows just from the ISO, then shut it down and clone it, and leave it a VM, and then start the
Actually,
automation of there.
when talking about CUGC and how we do it there, then we're using templates, but then in the VMware side.
Yeah.
But it can be a strategy that you're using templates, but how we deploy our templates is using a pipeline. And so we leveraging Packer in order to create the image itself, and then it automatically will convert to a template, which can be leveraged by Terraform.
yes, but then you still have a mechanism in place that basically automates the creation of a template.
Exactly.
So there
That's
is
the
already
point.
flexibility. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly, because that allows you also to convert back to later versions if you're using Git, of course.
Yeah, so let's just move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
Before we start focusing just on the hypervisor, because I think there are a lot of cool Citrix technologies that maybe are a bit more suitable for automation and aiding us in our search to automate the entire flow. So this, of course, is, I think, a topic that there are many blog posts about on the internet on how to use or even how to combine creating golden images and PVS. But I did wanted to address this because I think, Joe, you already shared with us previously that you did some amazing work in Ansible as well, creating even your own modules to really talk with the APIs, or, well, I guess the PowerShell scripts.
PowerShell, yeah. So I created a bunch of roles in PVS. They're up on the Ansible Galaxy now, and there's a copy up on the GitHub repository down there below. And essentially, it's not, the only thing that's not done with that repository is it doesn't have a lot of documentation, or really any documentation in there yet. It's one of the last things I need to do with it. But it has all the it has the ability to not only just do the installations of the servers, the provisioning servers, and the target devices and stuff like that, but there's a couple of workflows in there where you can actually go through, build your master image, to take that master image, create your PVS image from that, right? So it'll actually upload that image into PVS, and then you can assign it to a catalog, and you can put all that into a playbook, and have use some kind of orchestration to kick off a Packer installation of the OS, hand it off to Ansible, do the end-to-end installation and configuration of the master image, upload that to PVS, and then assign that to maybe a QA catalog or a test dev catalog, and automatically reboot the virtual machine. Then next time you log in, now you're using an updated version or an evergreen version of your master image using PVS and CVAD.
Wow. I'm just,
And if you're not
now I
in
want to
Geek
call him too, Patrick.
Sorry?
Now I want to be on the call with you and Joe, definitely, because this already gets me excited about using PVS again.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to use Ansible to do all that. If you want to go, you can kind of dissect a lot of the PowerShell scripts that are up there. So Ansible is kind of that delivery mechanism that's managing the installation or the playbook installation and the flow. But if you wanted to take something and throw that in MDT or put in some other kind of framework, you could take that PowerShell code and reverse engineer some of it and bring that over, and then you'll know how to do the image update. So do the PVS image process and how to move things from a catalog, how to assign a VDIS to a catalog and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So did you feel when you were working with the commandlets that they were well documented, or does that still can use some love from Citrix itself? And I know Pat is on the call, so this is just a quick
Take
wink
your
to
notes,
him.
Pat. Take your notes.
The image creation process, there are some documentation for it, and the stuff that they have doesn't work, right? So I spent a couple hours trying to figure out what combinations of switches actually work and why it kept failing. And then I found the secret Big Mac sauce recipe, right? And so it took a lot of trial and error and a lot of recipe creation in order to get to that point, a lot of failures to get to there, but finally was able to get the right combination of switches to be able to do that image creation process. But
So
yeah,
it
a lot
would
of stuff
also
could be
basically,
documented better.
yeah, so it would also make sense to use your Ansible modules. And once we feel that we want to fully understand how you created them, to look at the code and how you use the commandlets for your benefits.
Correct. Because once you start understanding, once you understand the high level, right, and once you get down into the low level stuff and start understanding that, then you could create your own, or you can modify. It's like, hey, I really wanted to do this, so now you have that ability to tweak it or change it. Like the thing was like Owen Reynolds' Packer script. I took that and I tweaked the crap out of that thing, so it does everything I wanted to do from a Packer standpoint. But I started with his code, I got it working, and then I tweaked it little by little, and then I extrapolated the crap out of those configurations, so it's barely even recognizable anymore. But that's how I started. And then you can do the same thing with these modules. You don't have to do those things that I'm doing. You could take what I've done and the experience I've put in there and take that to the next level. And that's kind of what I'm hoping people will do.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I actually have a question to apply a question from the Q&A, but how do you orchestrate that, Joe? Because I think also in the Q&A was something asked about using the task scheduler for executing scripts. But how do you manage to execute certain tasks on certain times?
You can do a couple of things. I mean, Ansible has a little buddy called it's AWX, which is Ansible Tower. So again, Ansible is owned by Red Hat, and there's a paid version and there's the free version. When you want to start doing orchestration, Ansible Tower is the tool that a lot of people that use Ansible use to do a lot of that orchestration. Now, you don't have to necessarily pay for Ansible Tower because there's the free version called AWX, which is kind of the freebie version of Ansible Tower. So you can go out and start working and doing some of that orchestration with the Ansible Tower. I know you guys have been using like DevOps and stuff for that. I haven't really gotten into some of the DevOps, but if you want to talk about how you could use DevOps to do some of the orchestration.
Yeah, Joe, I started also with the Ansible Tower. Isn't it that you can just fire up the playbook again and again, so Ansible ensures that it's that state where the VM is? I think that's a different approach when doing an MDT deployment, for example.
Yeah, one thing I did not like about MDT is just it's a start to finish type thing. I get there's ways to get in there and start from the middle, but I don't want to have to deploy an OS every time I want to test a change in a playbook, right? I want to be able to snap back a virtual machine and to test my playbooks individually. Or if the VM's already there, or if somebody has another way of deploying the VMs, right, from a template, per se, instead of just, an automated install, then I want to have that ability to be able to have different handoffs and be able to pick up, a flow. So maybe I did have a flow that failed. I don't necessarily have to restart from the beginning again. I can fix the issue with the playbook and then start forward from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does for me.
For me too.
But I think the key in here, when you have scripts and especially also when you need to ensure that the scripts are executed, so and how it's also described in the Q&A in high available script, then it's really recommended to at least leverage orchestration solution. It can be Ansible Tower, but it can also be like a DevOps where you can just schedule your task using a pipeline, and that will distribute it towards the agents. That can be on premises or hosted in Azure, whatever you like. But once an agent is down, it will just execute that specific task on another agent. And I think this is a key difference in comparing it at least to scheduling in your task scheduler on a single machine. Yeah,
that makes sense.
And I think if we're still on this topic, this is more how we do things. But I think if I go back to the question earlier in this session, is where to start. And if you ask me, that your image automation is, I think, the most key to start if you're not doing automation at all. I see a lot of customers installing things by hand. And I will advise you, if you do not automation, start with the image part. Two ways. One is security. So if you want to update on a frequent pace, you can use automation to just redeploy your image more frequently than once in a month or once in a quarterly, for example. And I think Windows is also updating, especially when doing VDI. You got a lot of new branches of Windows 10. And when you do everything manually, and I see some companies having that recipe, like I need to click this when I need to upgrade my Windows 1903 to 20H2, and then they just click everything, and then they just forget one registry key, and the whole thing doesn't work anymore. So I think if you want to hold on the pace of the Windows 10 updates, just go to start with the automation part. Like last week, I did an upgrade from Windows 10 1909 to 20H2, but just changing one line, and then I'm upgraded. So that's awesome, and it will save you a lot of time and effort, also in the future with new Windows builds. So if you ask me, I think this is better to start automating than try to start automating and installing your PVS server. That's also very awesome on the next step. But if I had the choice, start doing the image automation. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, well, if we're looking at where we're going for the next couple of years, we are seeing that the infrastructure components are becoming commodity or cloud services. So the real focus, I think, for a lot of customers is that golden image, because that's still the part that you control and that you need to deliver and maintain yourself. That is something that a lot of the cloud services will not start doing for you. At least not in the near future, as far as I know. So definitely agree with Patrick. Golden image automation is the first step.
Yeah.
Sometimes you build an image by hand, and then 6 months later you're trying to remember what happened 6 months ago, and you'd say, hey, what did we do 6 months ago? It's like, I don't remember, and so now you have to kind of reverse engineer that. And it's like, if you automate it, spend the time automating, it's kind of self-documenting in that aspect.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't even remember what I did a day ago. So how imagine 6 months? I don't know.
So we only have a couple of minutes left, and I know I prepared a lot of more questions. So we will definitely address them after the webinar to make sure that you still get the answers to the questions that you send us. I know if we go to the next slide, it would focus on virtual apps and desktops, which basically is the core infrastructure. So you can show that, Stephanie, and then definitely want to address this, but because I do want to make sure that everyone understands that if we're talking about DevOps, if we're talking about automation, we're not just focused on cloud services. We definitely still have a lot of love for on-premises, and we do believe, especially with a lot of the latest versions having API support, that on-premises can be automated just as good and just as well as the cloud services these days. But I do want to make sure that you also see the next slide, which has well, not the biggest question on Citrix Cloud, but definitely enables us to also address Citrix Cloud and what the future for automation will look like. So any comments on that, Ryan?
I think you said a lot, but in regards of Citrix Cloud, I think Pat Patterson, he created a lovely starting point and a lot of documentation how to get started. I think a couple weeks ago we even did also a session regarding getting started. So there's a lot of content there. But I think the concept also leveraging Citrix Cloud can also be applied on premises or vice versa. You really need to get familiar with the tools and the tool set, and then it's applicable to both.
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to focus on this question is that I still think that we are mostly focused with our DevOps and automation on greenfield deployments of either cloud environments or on-premises environments. Where I feel that the next step, and that's what this question was addressing. So how are we going to automate administrating our environments that are up and running? I'm still struggling with the fact that I cannot sell to my user that they just have to wait maybe even less than an hour nowadays, but I will just give them a new deployment and they should be all good to go because we have everything segmented, like user profiles are separate, so that will not be affected. But I still think that there are some administrative tasks that definitely will need to be addressed and taken into account from an automated perspective.
So from my perspective, at least from an infrastructure standpoint, I always apply the greenfield approach where you're going to rebuild and destroy. I think this is the ideal scenario also to, if you have any update, especially in an on-premises scenario, you can just apply the new patches and redeploy everything and have a migration strategy automated in place to ensure that everything is moved over towards the new version. In regards of really the admin tasks, I have to admit that the most projects I'm involved is, like you mentioned, in building up the environment, of course, and not in the sysadmin corner. But you can, I think, you really can leverage technologies like DevOps and hooking up, for example, towards a logic app with a simple form that you can just enable an end user to execute a specific pipeline with parameters. And then you can just create small little tasks to reset stuff and leveraging DevOps to orchestrate it. But using a logic app with a simple form to publish it towards your customers.
That makes sense. So how about you, Joe?
I'm kind of expanding on that. So like one of the reasons I like the Ansible so much is it can be very procedural, and that you're not looking for the trying to define the desired state and pushing the button to get that, but maybe you do have workflows you want to automate, and so now you can create playbooks that allow you to take some of the repetitive tasks that an administrator might do on a daily basis and start to automate those little by little. And even like some of the projects where you're doing, let's say you're doing the disaster recovery project, what can you automate in the event that you need to fail over one data center to another? You start to automate the little bits and pieces to it. So now you have a playbook so that when the time comes that you do have to fail over, you're not trying to do everything manually and try to fit everything within a certain SLA, but then now you also have the procedures that are in a playbook that you can just execute and offload. You may still have to do some things manually, but you want to try to automate as much of it as you can so you don't have to worry about those bits. And you can even take those, you can test them out, and you can keep those playbooks up to date. And you can if you can lab some of the stuff out, you can take this stuff into a lab and test a lot of this stuff and say, hey, this is what we need to do for DR. Does it actually work? Can we test this stuff out? And if it doesn't, then you just modify your playbook accordingly. But
yeah, I think that addresses what I was talking about. For me, for instance, what I see is a lot of admins are struggling with something that should be very simple, like renewing certificates on web servers. And that's a process that used to happen like once every 3 years. And I think nowadays it's happening once a year. But what you see is that every time the deadline of the certificate comes closer, people start to get nervous because, yeah, there was a way of how to do that, but what was it again? And then they have to, if they're lucky, there is some sort of manual, or there is some senior admin still available that remembers the process and can help you with it. But I think those tasks and that knowledge, if you automate that, then you can at least pass on that knowledge basically already in a documented way. So those are like automated tasks that I think are good candidates for automation.
But actually, I had a meeting today together with my team where we just sit together and brainstorm about simple tasks that helps lower the ops load. And I think the starting point is just talk about it and see what trends you have in the support tickets that you get, and see if you can automate tasks. Think big, start small. I think that's the key.
And Patrick, you had a closing statement as well.
Yeah, but I was exactly the same like Ryan. We think big, but sometimes as a sysadmin, you need to see the advantage of automating. So if you just automate away your top 2 most logged issues and you do the change over and over again, then as a sysop admin, then you see the power of automation. Like, hey, I do not have to kill that session 100 times a day. The user can kill his own session, and then I can do other stuff. Just
yeah, I think that's very powerful.
Like baking cookies.
Exactly.
So
I think judging on the time, and I do not want to run over, though I know we can talk about this for hours and hours. I did want to check in with Stephanie to see if she's going to take control back, or if we are still allowed a bit more time.
What we've done in the past is we've said that, we do have one slide left, and I know this was Esther's specialty coming up, that we can run over a little bit. And I know if some of you have to go, we are recording, so you will get the recording, and, we're going to package up all these resources for you. So if the 4 of you are available for maybe like another 10 minutes or so, we could go to that last slide and then wrap up, if that's okay.
I was trying to avoid that last slide, but thanks.
Well, you can if you want.
So just bring on the last slide. And
Okay, here it comes. And go.
so I was trying to be behaving very well and take my moderator task very seriously and try to keep my contributions to a minimum. But the guys all agreed that this definitely is my fun and exciting topic to talk about. So we did get a question on whether or not we're going to focus on REST APIs or Nitro for NetScaler, ADC, ADM. And what I did is I just made sure that I added the link to the Citrix Converge session that I did on Nitro. So definitely check that out. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. So I'm just gonna get off easy this way. But the one thing that I did want to address is that for me, having that REST API on the ADC and the ADM enables me to not just focus on the core Citrix infrastructure, but to also take the full stack end to end into my automation deployments. So now with the REST API, I'm also able to not just deploy the ADCs, but also configure it and even administrator it in an automated way. So I do think that this opens up taking that network components into either on-premises or in the cloud into your whole DevOps strategy, so to speak.
I think it is key at least to investigate how REST APIs work. So I really can recommend the session also of Pat again, because he really also explains the basics of REST. But it's sometimes I'm really flabbergasted about the amount of APIs that are available for all various solutions. Almost every solution that's out there has an API or some kind of an API. So really understanding the key concept of an API will help you. Also, especially when also you're troubleshooting. So when you browse to a site and hit F12 for the tooling, you can see all the API calls. Understanding that process will help you automating tasks. For example, what I did is I created a garbage collector that using an API that I get a notification if my garbage is going to be picked up the next day. So it's really understanding the concept, and then you can apply it to everything.
Yeah, even in daily life, like I'm using APIs for my CrossFit registrations, like it's now the COVID, so there's limited space in the lesson, and first served who's in, so every lesson is fully booked within 5 minutes. So I'm using an API, so I'm always first. And always in the CrossFit
I should
lesson.
have used that with the Lego orderings that I did, where I was staying up till 1 a.m. to try to be the first and to get those exclusive Lego sets. But
use the API, then you're first.
yes, that's what
Or
I
second
realize now.
if another API is in there.
Well, at least that makes sure that your automation is going to be fun, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you can apply it to a task that has nothing to do with your work, and it still helps you understand the concepts, and then eventually you can still apply it to work-related stuff.
Yeah. For example, and that's what I'm also learning to think in flows, is to do home automation and use, for example, Node-RED. And when you see it, it's like, hey, Citrix Octablue. But for example, I got small kids, and they always forget to turn off the light and to turn on the ventilation system. So
Yeah.
I just installed everything in the toilet for the switch appear to detect people. So when he comes into the toilet, the mechanic ventilation goes on, the light goes on, and if it's not detects nobody in 5 minutes, it will shut everything down. So yeah, that's a little bit fun to do, but when you're using Node-RED, for example, it's very easy. Then you get some kind of understanding what is a flow instead of just seeing lines. and it's fun to do, because when you're doing a lot of home automation, then you think other projects at home, and then your wife is telling like, no, do not the next
It's not
project,
not working.
otherwise we get fat and do nothing anymore. Everything.
I had
I-
last
I
time
had
with that the lights was not turning on anymore
I
due
had
to an
a-
issue with the detection of the sun. Yeah.
I had a big debate about my busy light outside of the door to let my girlfriend know, instead of this stupid paper note that said, I'm doing a webinar, stay out. I now have a light, a Raspberry Pi with a shield on it that shows a great red light. But I positioned it not exactly in the right place on the door, so it's still too much inside for her liking. So yeah. Oh, and I
it's
used
always
a
red.
black cable on a white door frame, so definitely
Yeah.
lost points there. So Joe, any
And
last
the
comments
downside is
from you?
always red because of a busy schedule, of course.
True.
Yeah, I like you guys' idea. This kind of going back a few years with the whole OptiBlue and the IoT stuff, and one of the reasons why we pushed it was just to get people interested in doing some of not only just the IoT projects, but also getting them to get down into that developer level and start to understand, hey, it's just a few APIs. It's not a black box. I just need to, send this call over here and I can turn on the light. But I could do it from a button over here and then go halfway around the world and via the internet to turn on the light. And so you start thinking about, hey, how do I create these flows? What do I want to do in mind? It's just a fun way to learn how to do a little bit of programming, right? And if you could even get started with IoT and then move into start doing business automation and workflows and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. For instance, I was in a call, an MVP call, late in the evening, and I programmed all my lights in my study room to turn off at 11 p.m. because I needed some visual reminder that there is a time to work behind a PC and there's a time to relax, to make sure that I keep a balance between work and private life. So I was still in this meeting, it was running late, and then all of a sudden I was sitting in the dark. But I did learn from some of the responses that other people thought it was pretty awesome that I just had that simple automation in place to remind myself to take some time off and away from the computer. So it could be like Patrick and like Ryan said earlier. It could be something simple. It could be something small. But it could definitely be something fun to dive into automation and to figure out how to make things act and behave in the way you want them to. So I think with that closing statement, we want to thank you for sticking out with us. And we definitely want to schedule some follow-up webinar topics. Let us know what you're interested in. And we'll hope to see you again at the next Geek Speak or other CUGC webinars. Any last comments from you, Stephanie?
Yes, thank you so much, all of you. Thank you for doing this today. Really appreciate it. While you guys were being so smart and answering all these great questions, I was backstage doing a random drawing to see who our winners of our CUGC Swag is. So I have Wilfred Wong, Robin Stoltz, and Nathan Payne. If you're still on, yay! I'll get in touch with you via email after the webinar, and you'll have a choice of one of these items. Also, I put a survey link in the chat for you guys. There is a question on there about the next Geek Speak. There are a few topics that we've thrown out there that you can vote on, and you have a write-in too if you want to come up with your own topic. But definitely fill that out. We want to hear from you. So Thanks again to everyone. I think this was really great, and we'll do our best to get any questions we didn't get answered right away. I'll be on these guys.
Definitely.
All of you on my screen to get the answers written out, and I'll try to get that out as soon as I possibly can. So thanks, everyone. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day or your evening, depending on where you are. And we'll see you at another event soon. Hopefully, we've got several webinars coming up, Patrick's and Pat Patterson's coming up, lots of them. So see you all soon. Bye.
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 Thank you.